Chris, how's it going, brother?
Hey, Bobby. I'm relegated to the basement today. I'll give you the video here in a second.
You working from home?
I had to leave midday, so I've been working at home since about 1.
Is that the baseball board? You know, the dartboard thing? Who else had one of those? Someone had one.
Who was that? Geez, who was that? It was like Jamie.
Jamie, yeah, that's right.
Maybe. No, that's in the garage like hers is. This is, another one of those wooden garage sale finds. I can't remember what it's called, but it has like little pockets in the corners and like some, I don't know, tokens that come with it. We've never played it, but I thought it was kind of cool wall feature.
Got it. Hey, Jen, I need a favor.
What's that?
So we are going to spend one last director's call tomorrow going over the strategic plan. Okay. I transcribed it over to a Word document so it's a bit more intelligible. Okay. So I'm going to send that email out, and I know everyone's going to be like, FML, but I want you to be like, yo, this is going to be so fun. Can't wait.
Okay, I will definitely cheer it on.
You just reply all to that for me, my friend, because I am struggling.
Okay. I certainly will.
I appreciate you always having my back. Agnes, we get to hang out again.
I know, twice today.
That was so much fun. It was like, I left so re-energized after that call.
Yeah, that was actually a very good call.
Jamie Case, newest member of the Ampahas fam. So excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here.
So I know we are expecting Jordana today to be speaking. Rory, unfortunately, is out sick. Kelly Dewar is going to be coming in from another meeting. And so the B team, as in me, has been called in to help facilitate this call. So don't mind me as I try to struggle through this, because I am definitely not Rory or Kelly, and they're so good at this. So actually, Jamie, I'm going to just have you co-host this with me. You're on the Haas team now. So.
Oh, fantastic. 0% prepared.
You're on the Haas team. See what I'm saying?
Great.
Just get it.
I'm learning.
Erica, how are you?
No complaints. It's 74 degrees in Tallahassee, Florida today.
What's the humidity like?
It's not bad, but it should be like 45 degrees. So this is way warmer than normal.
Very, very cool. Jordana.
Hi.
How are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I'm happy to get it kicked off as we're going to be tossing over to Jordana. Again, my name is Bobby Mann. I'm the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Pilot Director, for those that do not know me. I am filling in today for Rory and Kelly. Kelly should be joining us shortly. Rory is out sick. He wanted me to send all of my love to you and echo that this is one of his favorite meetings of the week, and he can't wait to see you all next week. But I'm happy to be here and help with the facilitation. So I believe, Jordana, you lead so many groups, but the goal today is going to be to talk about transforming foster clinic or a shelter clinic into a foster clinic, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to talk about shelter clinics and how we need to shift them so that they're more foster friendly.
Awesome. And for those of you that do not know Jordana, Jordana is the Maddie's Medical Program Director for the American Pets Alive team. So this is really in her wheelhouse. We're super excited to have her today. I know before we get into the bigger conversation, Jordana had a couple slides that she was going to share with us to help really put this conversation in context. So Jordana, if you want to get it kicked off with that, and then we'll open up to questions as soon as you're done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen here in just a minute. All right. Can you guys see my screen okay? Well, it's loading now.
I can tell you when it loads.
It's not loading. Let me try again. Ah,
So as Jordana is trying to get her presentation loaded, are there any new members or participants on this call today? Jane, is this your first time?
Yes, it is. It is my
Okay.
first time.
Tell us where you're from. Welcome.
Thank you. Springfield, Illinois. We've got a foster network organization, does cruelty and neglect investigations and advocacy.
Awesome. And how did you hear about the call?
An email from, it must have been Pets Alive, American Pets Alive.
Cool. Very cool. And Jamie, it sounds like that's your neighborhood, huh?
Yeah, she's just about an hour and a half north of me.
Hey, Jordana, if you're having issues, do you want to have me pull it up for you?
yeah, I might do that. Oh, wait, I think I might have got it. Sorry, guys. But I love technology.
Jane, what group are you with?
I'm with the Illinois Humane. We are, so we've been around since 2003. Not huge, but and I was with APL before. I was on their board for about 6 years before we spun off, just to concentrate on cruelty and neglect and the recovery of those animals, since that could be so expensive in and of itself. But we do a variety of things. So it's Illinois Humane, and plenty of time in the legislature and the like, since we're right here.
Very cool. Jordana, it looks like you're up and running, so take it away.
Okay, so the work group that I'm leading is Transforming Shelter Clinic to Foster Clinic. And I want to, shout out the clinic, or the work group members. Stephanie Miller is actually on the call today. But this is really the work of all of the members of this group. So while I'm the one giving this presentation, I'm not the only one that has done this work. So why is this work group important? Why are we doing this? And really it kind of boils down to the challenge that clinics face when they are treating animals in foster care versus in shelter. And that challenge is that there is a person attached to that animal. And we need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of that foster caregiver in addition to the needs of the animal. And it just adds a layer of, I don't want to say it's a challenge, but it makes it a little bit more complicated for sure. And so one of the things that we did early on in this work group is made a document that lists components needed for successfully creating and building a foster-centric shelter clinic. And it's actually 3 pages long. I just kind of picked out the important ones.
Why are you doing that?
It's a very long document, and all of the bullet points on this document and on the longer document are extremely important. And so kind of what we boiled it down to is there's a lot to think about if we want to be successful in turning our clinics into a foster-centric clinic. We want it to be a thoughtful process. because we want to make sure that we're serving the fosters as well as we can. And really the goal is to make them feel like they're a VIP. You know, it's not the transaction that we have with them. It's not a financial transaction like there is in a regular private practice, but there's definitely still a transaction there. And if we're not serving the fosters well, then they're going to stop fostering. And that's a foster home that we lose for the animals in our care. So we really want you to think about where you are right now. And because this is all scalable, right? All of our shelters and rescues are different sizes. We have different resources. So just kind of looking at where you are right now and doing a self-assessment. Where are you excelling? Where are your gaps? Maybe consider sending out a survey to your fosters and actually see what they think is needed or where they think you guys are excelling. Because really, ultimately, we can have an idea of where we think we need to improve and what's going really well, but our customers are the fosters, and so it's important that we hear from them. You may need to restructure your staff if you're not structured in a way that you can give the time to fosters that they need with their animals. At Austin Pets Alive, we have dedicated staff every day that their sole job is to talk to fosters. They see appointments, they help them schedule, answer any questions. And so making staff and volunteers available to fosters, that is their priority each day, is going to be important. Keeping customer service a priority and just stopping that negative chatter. One of the things that I have found is we can be a barrier to foster-centric clinics because fosters are going to make mistakes. They're humans, just like we are. Staff make mistakes, fosters are going to make mistakes. And creating a culture where it's okay for them to make mistakes. And, do we need to provide more training? What do we need to do to maybe prevent it in the future? And making it so that it's acceptable to have errors and mistakes, as long as they're not costing lives or, extremely careless. Let's talk through those things and create that culture of just mutual understanding. And again, the goal should be that we have fosters feel like VIPs. They're our #1 customer. Every time they come, they call us, they email us. We're excited to talk to them and we're excited to help them and answer their questions. So our work group right now has some deliverables that we're getting together. One of these, and I can send you guys links to these if you'd like to see them, is going to be two how-to documents. One is on implementing virtual care. And we kind of debated back and forth a little bit. Should it be telehealth? We really didn't want to do telemedicine because it's not necessarily telemedicine. And we kind of landed on virtual care. And then communicating with foster caregivers, because that's a really important piece of this whole program that is, it's going to kind of make or break your foster-centric clinic. And then we're also working on a training tool, which is going to be a resource catalog. So ideally, if you're in a shelter, you have access to this. It might look like a spreadsheet to begin with, but really it's going to be grouped in categories of trauma, neonatal, administering oral medications, administering injections, so that you, staff and volunteers, can actually go to this catalog, find a resource, and then they can either share that with their foster or they themselves can provide it to their foster. And then we really landed on, which I think is going to be really exciting. It's going to be a little bit till we get there, but a wiki page. Where it can be all things. We recently just talked about it was going to be a medical foster wiki page, but we're considering making it just a general foster wiki page, and medical is a component of that. But that would be really exciting because that would be shareable on a very large scale, which is super cool. And then one more thing. So we talked through, Austin Pets Alive has these Google Forms. We have a video, and I'll put the link to this video in the chat after this presentation. But it's using things like Google Forms, to get information from fosters. We as staff get it in an email, and then we can start the triage. Before the foster is even calling us or emailing us, all they do is fill out a simple form, which looks like a survey. we can get the answers that we need and then contact them and figure out how we triage whatever their need is. There are lots of pros because we can get a lot of information without necessarily getting the extra information. We're not having that conversation. We're just getting the bulk of what we need. And then we can also look at collective responses. So over a period of time, we can look at, the pie chart and see what are we getting the most questions about and start to look at data that way. The downside for us currently is that we triage a lot of them because it's quick and easy for fosters to do. They might be submitting them more than they normally would, say, writing an email to you. And then another con can also be that it's asynchronous communication. So if we do have a question or there's a piece of information that was left out, we don't have a really quick and easy way to ask that foster. We either have to, give them a phone call or shoot them an email or something like that. All right, that is all I have for the presentation.
Jordana, thank you so much for that. So Jane, just to also add a little bit about this group, really the goal of this group is peer-to-peer facilitated conversation. We're here to learn from each other and grow. We do encourage as many people as possible to be on camera if you're willing to. We'd love to see your faces to really engage in the conversation. But it's really just to ask questions, learn, and grow from each other. So there are a couple questions that I have. One, I would love for all of you to use the chat and let us know if you yourself are responsible for or work for the foster program at your organization. And as we're doing that, I'd love to hear from one or two people on this call about how their foster experience or program has been through COVID over the last 6 or 7 months. How has that change been felt and what kind of impact has that made on your staff? I love that Brenda is the CEO of the organization and she's like, no, I'm not responsible because I let my people be responsible for these things. I love that.
Awesome.
Would anybody like to share? Erica, I'm going to pick on you otherwise.
So actually, I do have a question. One of most of what we're doing for fosters, sorry, barking dog, is telehealth and curbside. So we schedule the foster appointment, they drop the animals off curbside, we go retrieve them, and they have their appointment. With the exception being, if the foster has to have their animal euthanized, they're allowed to be present, those sorts of things. Anyway, we're struggling with scheduling. And I'm not sure if anybody has any good technology or programming that they're using for that, but that seems to be occupying a lot of our foster coordinators' time.
I'll kind of chime in while everybody's maybe thinking about that. This is one place we use Waitwhile. It's originally like a restaurant application that has translated really well in our medical clinic to schedule foster appointments. It's pretty quick and easy to use, pretty user-friendly. And a lot of people have liked self-scheduling, or they let their fosters self-schedule. I think it's fine, but my concern is that fosters will be scheduling themselves when they don't need to be. That could be something that we handle over email, over the phone. And so I don't know if personally, I don't know if self-scheduling is the best way to go, especially when we're talking about increasing volume, because every appointment slot matters.
Awesome. And then something else, a great resource that I want to share is from another working group, which is our Tools and Technology working group. I'm going to share my screen for just a moment. I'm going to put this into the chat. This is a technology catalog that was created by the Tools and Technology Working Group. So if you click on the catalog, it actually has all of these topics bucketed with specific technologies that relate to them. So even if you went to the foster section, you'll see applications or technologies that can support you all the way from 911 foster down to things as simple as Google Forms, as well as other technologies that can support this. There's also a section for remote services, so appointment-based scheduling. So this is a great place to look for all of these tech tools. So I will put this in the chat right now. Any other thoughts on this? I mean, I know we were talking about acuity and wait a while in the chat. Does anybody want to chime in why they like one versus the other? Or has anybody tried both? Jordana, this is where we practice the art of just being uncomfortably silent until someone talks. Trust
My
me, we're going to get
question-
really good at this.
My question about acuity is, I guess it's a simple Google, but I'm not sure what the cost is. A lot of these decisions are based around cost, right? What can we afford? So that's something to think about also, is how much money can you spend on a scheduling software?
Anybody want to chime in on cost that's currently using it?
So Sarah Aguilar says basic acuity with, I think, 3 calendars is about $20 a month, and they have a nonprofit discount. That's nice.
So is that pack has the highest level, it's about $50 a month. And also on that technology catalog, one of the line items for each of the technologies is an approximate cost. So we have incorporated that into there as well. So Jordan, that's a really, really good point. So Jordan, I have a question for you. So how do organizations that have foster programs define their organization as a foster-centric organization versus just having a foster program?
Yeah, so Kelly who leads the foster work group, I believe their team has given it a number, something like, I could be wrong, like over 50% of animals are in foster. You should consider yourself a foster-centric shelter. If that's incorrect, anybody can please correct me.
I think that's right.
Okay.
I'm working on a course for her right now.
So I have a ton of questions, but I really want to just create space for everybody that came to this specific call to talk to Jordana or anyone else. Does anybody have any questions before I just keep rambling on?
I threw a question in the chat, Bobby, and I could probably talk to Jordana for months on this, but I thought it'd be good to just have it out with the group. But something that seems to keep coming up, and kudos to anyone who's figured this out, but it seems like communication for foster parents, especially when you scale up, is really lacking sometimes when it comes to medical issues. And I think it maybe is an issue of who's responsible. Is it the foster coordinator? Is it the medical clinic? So if you want to talk on that, like any pointers on who should be sort of that point person for the foster parent with a dog or cat with medical needs?
Yeah, I think it's again, one of those things that depends on the resources of the clinic and the foster team. I do think that if the clinic has the staff or has the volunteers that can field any medical question directly, I think that's fantastic. You do have to consider what information the foster team needs to know from the conversations that happen or the email exchanges. So there might be a lot of like CCing foster team if your clinic is directly talking to fosters kind of as the first line of defense. I think there's a big benefit. I think it can be hard for foster coordinators to be expected to field medical questions. It's really it's not their job, I don't think. But if the shelter doesn't have the clinic staff resource to have them be that frontline person, then I think the foster coordinator is a great option. But I think we owe it to those foster coordinators to give them training, have a communication tree so they know who to contact, when to contact that person, so the foster coordinator isn't kind of left on an island wondering who they should contact about this question. They should be provided with that communication tree information.
For us, one of the things that has helped out our foster coordinator is that she actually meets with our vet team twice a week and does foster rounds with them. So just as they would walk through the shelter and do shelter rounds, they actually go through the entire list of fosters, and she'll just bring up stuff that's progressing or that is doing better, because most of our animals are either neonates or have some sort of medical issue when they go into foster care. We do try to, like, get those big behavior dogs into foster care as well, but sometimes they're, on medications. So checking in with the vet team twice a week has really helped them, especially through COVID.
That's amazing. I think it's fantastic. And it's probably a really great way for her to continue learning, and, keep broadening her range of knowledge when it comes to medical. That's great.
Madison, I see that you put in the chat that you've been the dog foster coordinator for 1 month at your organization and that you're still learning. So just so you know, we are all just still learning. But I'd love to hear about how things are going in your new position and sort of what you walked into and where you came from before.
Hey, so previously I was working in day practice. So over the month, it's been interesting trying to get, because right now we're really focusing on growing our foster program, just getting more people in it. The struggle we're having there is a lot of our dogs they're like solo dogs. They can't be around other animals. Most of them don't really want to be around other kids. And a lot of my foster families are like full families. So just trying to like increase the engagement with that by trying to get some more highly adoptable dogs into foster. But at the size that it is right now, I'm not having too hard of a time keeping up with the communication, but at the size I want to get it to the point where I'm struggling to keep up with all my fosters. So right now our focus is really on growth, and then of course maintaining the fosters that we have and making sure they have a good experience.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I really love how you brought up the concept of also behavior. Jordana or anybody else that wants to answer this, where is that intersection between the medical support and the behavior support for foster dogs? I mean, does that fall within the entire program? Is the medical and the foster provide support? What does that look like, Jordana?
So at Austin Pets Alive, I think we're a little bit different, but it works really well. Our behavior team feels they are the say all and all be all of behavior knowledge. And so our veterinarians really rely on them to be alerted as to when a dog might need to be on maybe like a behavior modification medication or something like that. So even in foster, it goes through behavior team, and then behavior team will funnel it to the medical team on an as needed basis.
Do others have similar procedures, or is someone handling their foster program differently? Kathy, how are you doing things out in Canada? Or I see is Stephanie on here as well?
Yeah, I'm here. So with our foster program, we're lucky that we have 3 registered veterinary technicians on staff. So they're very involved in the foster program. And then we have like 1 key coordinator that kind of oversees all of the routine care. So right now we just have kind of a set of staff that oversee the foster program. I would say that anything medical is directed to the RVTs, and then we have 24-hour support in terms of if there's after hours questions, we can field those and we can refer to a 24-hour merge vet as well. And in terms of COVID, like we're still on Teams. So when the RVTs switch out, because there's only 1 working on any given day, we keep kind of like a virtual round. So we'll update all of the cases that are currently in foster so that when the next RVT is in, they can quickly read all the updates and know kind of the status of everybody that's in foster at any given time.
Thank you for sharing, Stephanie. Megan, I see that you shared in the chat that you have a weekly team meeting. Who is a part of that team? What members of the staff are a part of those conversations? Oh, no worries. Well, we appreciate you chiming in. Does anybody else have weekly meetings with their staff? One of the things that I've really been interested in, typically in a lot of shelters, you'll see like the animal care technicians or the animal care supervisors, potentially the medical staff, maybe the director. Do any of you have your marketing team or your communications team join in on any of those calls as well, or those meetings as well? Chris, I know you probably wear all of those hats since you're so lean at your shelter, but what do you guys typically have a meeting like that? And if so, how many people show up?
No, so right now it's interesting when we're referring to like these teams and these positions and these titles that we don't have. So our shelter manager is overseeing the foster care program. We don't have any titles that have foster care in them, although hopefully that'll change shortly. But so we've got someone that's in a customer service title that's really working almost on a daily basis with the shelter manager, where they're working on placements of animals from the shelter into foster care, and then communicating with the foster care. We have volunteer team leaders and then volunteer foster caregivers. So so our system is like reliant on having like 2, 3, 4 caregivers assigned to each team leader. And so we're trying to recruit team leaders and caregivers simultaneously to build out the program, which didn't exist before March 14th. And then in terms of communicating with the clinic, they the foster team leaders then would communicate back with our customer service person or the shelter manager, or directly with our vet techs to try and ask questions, do telemedicine when possible, or to schedule appointments to have the animals come in for vaccinations, examinations, and so forth. But no marketing folks involved in that. So we're just kind of feeding stories and pictures and whatnot to the volunteer marketing team, which is through our friends group.
Awesome. And for those of you who don't know Chris, he's the director of Rochester Animal Care and Services, a tier 2 shelter that's been doing a ton of work on the Haas project. So if you are a government shelter, Chris is a wealth of resources regarding unions, contracts, budgeting. He's been just a huge asset to this project. I have another question for the group about culture change. We often hear that veterinarians get into shelter medicine because they don't want to have that client relationship and they just want to work with the animals. But then I also hear that that's not true. Does anybody want to share what their experiences are with their medical team and how they have really adapted to this culture change of being more foster-centric?
I'll go ahead and speak to that. We've had several vets at Austin Pets Alive over the last 12 years or so. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it's a little weird because the shelter owns the animal and the fosters have an opinion on care. And so that line gets a little bit blurred on, well, how much do we let the foster dictate what we're doing? And I think that's where it gets a little hard for vets, because there's not an owner that they're essentially, having a very transactional conversation with. I have found that it's helpful for vets to have somebody other than themselves to have some of these difficult conversations with fosters when needed, so that they can, because they're really busy anyways, right? They're seeing they need to see like 1 billion animals a day. And we need them to be seeing 1 billion animals a day. And so if we can take the burden of having those conversations off of their plate, then they can get the work done that we pay them to do. And we're probably better equipped, or some of us are probably better equipped to have those conversations with fosters in regards to care and, what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and the reason behind that. We do have a document, which is something that I recommend to every foster-centric clinic that states, it's called How We Make Medical Decisions. And we made it a few years ago, and it just states how we make medical decisions and why we make certain decisions. And it really helped fosters, volunteers, staff. It really helped everyone. It just provided some clarity around what the goal of the clinic is, and what the level of care that we're striving for is. So it took away a lot of the kind of like, it felt, I think, to other people like we were making decisions based on subjectivity when it really wasn't. There's a reason we make decisions a certain way. And so anyways, back to the initial question. If veterinarians aren't having to do, I don't think it's that they don't want to have those conversations or they don't want to talk to people, but I think it does get a little bit sticky. And it helps, they're super busy. They're just too busy to be having these conversations with every single foster and volunteer and staff. So that needs to be placed on somebody else's plate.
I can back up what Jordana is saying as well. I came from a rescue organization that was Foster-Centric, started sheltering a few years ago, and we used a full service vet. So I don't know if everybody on this call has their own clinic in-house or if anyone's using full service veterinarians, but we had our veterinarian go to the full service vet that we contracted with, go to the apprenticeship, the shelter medicine apprenticeship that AMPA put on and Jordana put on. And it was really pivotal for our organization. That document that she's talking about how we make medical decisions was really important for us at the time as well, because we found also from an equity standpoint, we would put thousands of dollars into an animal that we took in and rescued, but yet the community's coming to us and asking us to help the pet that they own with the broken leg. And we were telling them, no, it was too expensive. So we really needed to level that playing field, and making that medical document our own really helped guide those decisions and helped our volunteers and our fosters and the medical teams that we worked with at multiple vets have a protocol for certain things. So, and we ended up within the first few months of implementing that document and putting protocols together, like $60,000 at our full service veterinarians. It's just smart medicine, and your full service vets, if you are using them, aren't thinking like a shelter medicine vet. So helping them think like that is really, really important and can save you a lot of money.
I just wanted to say that we wrapped up interviews last month for a vet position that we have at our shelter, and we had 6 applicants, and all were interested specifically in shelter medicine, either had a background or a certificate in it, and not a single one of them said that they wanted to get into shelter medicine because of the not having to deal with clients. So we didn't find that to be true, at least in interviews. And many of them had said that they were looking forward to shelter medicine going towards more wellness support for their communities. So I thought that was an interesting take on things. I can imagine if you were a high volume spay neuter vet and you're doing surgeries all day, that you might not want to be bothered and might be more introverted and not be talking with clients. But I don't think shelter medicine is that's indicative of that.
It's funny, I actually hear that comment a lot more from registered veterinary technicians that are working primarily in practice and want to stay in the back behind the scenes because they don't like people. So I've actually experienced that more in private practice than I have in shelter medicine.
That's awesome.
Okay, I have a completely separate question. If all of you have a chance, I'm open to information from any of you. We put out a call for foster parents sort of early on, and then ran into a bit of a snag because of the pandemic and because of some of our staff with the training of new foster parents. So I reached out after I saw something from, I don't know, the association, HSUS, I can't remember, came like a couple weeks ago about a learning management system and taking advantage of sort of that kind of thing, which we have corporately. So I reached out to our corporate IT people, who then suggested I talk to our corporate communications people. So there's the marketing piece. At any rate, so now it's come back to land on us, of course, from the standpoint of putting together the content for the training and potentially videos, and our own staff to do the videos. Stratcom will help us by videoing them, but we have to do the piece in the video. So I'm just wondering if any of you have online training that you've put together for foster parents specifically, that you could share that you think is working or what's not working, and any feedback or information would be great.
Kathy, do you have to do the training yourselves? Can it not come from another organization? Like, can you grab, because there's so much already out there. It's just a matter of kind of like wrapping it all up in a package, which is something that we're working on as a working group to give to shelters.
No, I can happily steal from anybody who has stuff that looks like it's convertible, or we can just pick it up and plant it somewhere else. And had that conversation to a degree with our corporate communications people. So yeah, anything that exists, I'm happy to use. I just am really looking to see if people have already started doing some of this. And I see a note from Jackie saying that online training is such a time saver, and it will be for sure. Yeah, then I just have to, oh, thank you, Jordana. And then I just have to convince the staff that they're going to have to accept the online training as being good enough for the foster parents, and will then accept the foster parents.
For those of you who don't have access to LMSs, learning management systems, Maddie's University at Maddie's Fund does offer a free area on Maddie's University for shelters and rescues to place training. So you can pick from Maddie's University. And you can put resources of your own in that area. And you, as a manager, you can see who registers and who completes the trainings, different elements of the training. So that's an option as well. You get a URL with your shelter's name in it, and you give that to your learners, and they just go directly to it.
Yes, Dr. Peak was talking about that in our last work group meeting, and that sounds like it could be a really helpful tool for shelters. You just kind of pick what you want from the Maddie site, put it in your learning center, and share it with your staff.
Yeah, and you can use it for staff training too. You can have different sites, staff training or other volunteer training. For instance, Lollipop Farms has one for each segment of their shelter group. So a clinic one and ACO one. There are other options within it. You can, as I said, you can upload your own resources. You can enable a discussion tab. You can email your learners, things like that. It's really easy to use.
Jane, I saw you unmute a little earlier. Did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, the only thing on the conversation with the fosters and the veterinarians, we do use we use an outside vet and a pretty high level one, just because we're bringing animals in that are inevitably in need. We're bringing in abused animals, neglected animals, and then we've also got a critical care program that we're dealing with our animal with our government unit, because they claim they don't have the budget to provide critical care when an animal comes in considerable need. And so we really, so the nature of our setup is that we and thank God they do this, is that our vets really spend a lot of time with our fosters, just because we're in this kind of intense bringing the animals around, and we're very fortunate to have fosters with incredible skills with medical rehab and some with behavioral rehab. But it's a benefit for the fosters because they learn so much and they continue to be engaged. So it's just another side of it. It's a different kind of program, of course, but that was something I just wanted to throw out there, that I do see some incredible benefit when the fosters can be interactive with the veterinarians.
I also wanted to share a resource. I can't find it. I'm trying to locate it, but Best Friends has the telemedicine option or an app that they have now for fosters that fosters can call, which is the first step one of what we were giving our fosters, that can help with just some basic medical questions instead of us being the first stop. Yeah, best friend's vet assistant. I think that's right. And it kind of gives fosters that step one before they even call our clinic, from there. But I have another question too. Does anybody have a public clinic that they're offering in their facility as well? And is that the same staff that's doing both?
Chris, how long ago did you start doing the public side of the work?
So we've been running a small scale public spay neuter program out of our shelter clinic for years. And originally they were just kind of peppered in throughout the day. Then we segregated the public surgeries to weekend surgeries so they wouldn't mix with the shelter animals and they wouldn't interfere with length of stay and so forth. So then with the reduction in intakes, throughout the pandemic, we just started expanding our outreach service and support service work that we had been doing through like voucher programs and partnerships with outside clinics. But we were hearing more and more from the community that, they couldn't even get in for just like vaccinations or to have minor ailments, checked. They were months out at vet clinics. So since we were doing fewer surgeries for shelter animals, because there are fewer animals at the shelter, we just started offering services. So we would schedule, and we were getting some walk-ins too, but we would schedule based on the work that we're doing in the community and through our Pets for Life program and through the expansion of what we've been doing through the Haas pilot. So yeah, so it's kind of like been learning as we go, what's coming. They've been everything from just, basic wellness exams to pyometras and dystocias and dentals and an amputation of an injury that had gone septic. Yeah, it's like you never know what's coming, and if we can schedule it, we'll schedule it. Otherwise, sometimes it just shows up.
Chris, how do you advertise that service to your
Well, we
people?
don't don't because we can't keep up with, Rochester's not a huge city, but there's 200,000 people. So yeah, so it's a balance there. That's where, not having a marketing team, chomping at the bit to get these stories out might be helpful, because it's a built-in, pace setter for us. But no, we'll share. So like I just prepared a draft press release to go out about the Pets for Life award that we just got, and the person that I'm working with at City Hall wanted me to put some stories in to personalize it. So I'm putting in, a summary of a couple of accounts of these type of services we provided. And then, people hear it or read it or see it or whatnot. And then we'll get calls about it. But it is kind of a balance because we don't have a big team. This is not a big clinic. And, 50% of the time, our team is still doing spay neuter surgery. So it is kind of, select, but we're not really turning anybody away. It's just a matter of, can we see him today? Can we see him tomorrow? Can we see him next week? Can we see him 2 weeks from now?
Go ahead, Bryce.
So I have a question. We don't have a shelter clinic. Previously we had a partnership with our city's SPCA, but they ended their partnership with us about 2 months ago. So we've kind of just had interim vets that only do walkthroughs twice a week. So kind of we're trying to get the city, our city, like we're a city shelter, to approve us having our own clinic, but that's a ways off. So I'm just wondering what other people don't have an actual clinic in the building, or kind of what we're outsourcing all of our surgeries. The vet's only here 2 days a week. I'm scheduling fosters and in-house rounds all at the same time. So I don't know how else anyone is managing that, as well as I'm the foster coordinator as well as the medical coordinator. So it's been a definite adjustment.
Could you use your interim vets is it the same vet that visits your shelter?
Yes.
Would they be open to creating some protocols that you guys can follow for the, common routine things, so that you don't have to, that vet doesn't have to see every single patient every single time?
That's kind of what we have been doing. The vets that we have basically just kind of walk in, or like the last one we only had for a month, and she's like, we have protocols set in place. So right now they're just kind of following our protocols. But again, we're adjusting those protocols from having a partnership with a different veterinarian. So it's all been kind of a work in progress. We're doing, the screening prior to seeing what we can do. A lot of communication with fosters prior to them coming and seeing what we can kind of triage prior, which I think we're doing a good job of. Luckily, it's not kitten season and we're not inundated with, the typical kitten stuff. But it's just been a big adjustment from having a vet, like a vet in the building, or at least like a vet that we were able to work more one-on-one with.
Right. Well, it sounds like you have that built out. You're waiting for city approval to hire an on-staff vet?
Yeah, I mean, that's way down the line, I think. I know we had put out like a bid, because essentially it's like a contract. There's a space in the building to have another one, but that's out. But again, it hasn't been bid on or anything. So it's kind of one of those, like, a vet that's retired is right now our supervising veterinarian. But again, I'm having to do surgeries, at local clinic or local shelters are doing our spay and neuters, but any specialty surgeries, I'm having to go to private practice clinics or trying to utilize another SPCA or other clinics in the area. So it's been challenging.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough place to be in for sure. It sounds like you're doing a good job with what you have, though.
I have another question for folks too. Do you, what do you guys all do for emergencies? Do you have a foster emergency line? How do you manage that? If there are emergencies in the middle of the night.
At our shelter, we do have we have a Google line, and so whoever's on, we have usually it's our our foster coordinator or our manager. Somebody is on call for the night, and we just try to rotate that out as best as possible. But we also, we just honestly have to keep hitting home the fact of only call if it's a true emergency, and it can't wait until the morning, because you'll get some calls that absolutely did not need to come through, and some of that's just training, and some of that's your newbies. But we also have an internal foster Facebook page, because with everybody on there, sometimes if you're just not sure and you just have some questions, a lot of times they'll just help each other and answer the questions, especially our more experienced fosters who constantly watch that page and help us. But otherwise, the Google line really works well, because you can just switch who is getting the call that evening very easily. And then we go from there with triage it. Sometimes we just tell them it can wait till the morning, and sometimes we tell them that that they need to take it to the ER, and we authorize it that way.
That seems to be the general consensus.
We have, because we're a municipality, we have 311 answers all of our calls after hours. And we instruct our foster parents at the get-go that if they run into an emergency after hours, the specific verbiage to use when they call 311, because sometimes it can be hard to communicate that they are fostering for the shelter. So we have that all printed in our foster manuals with very specific instructions. And worst case scenario, we do have the contract with the 24-hour emerge clinic. That worst case scenario, if they can't get a hold of the on-call tech, they can head directly to the clinic. And again, we provide them that very specific verbiage that we are fostering an animal for the shelter.
The last organization I worked for had a partnership with an emergency clinic, and the emergency clinic is the one who would take the emergencies and deal with treating them. So there was like an after hours hotline, but instructions to determine if it was an emergency and to just go ahead and take them there, but that they had to be checked in overnight and returned to the shelter to be deemed healthy enough to return to the foster.
Yeah, and in my previous life for Front Street, what we did for emergency situations is in the contract that we had with our emergency veterinarian, we had a tiered approach to funding. So we would essentially green light up to, let's say, $250 or $500 of service, and there would be a list of services that fall under that tier. And then, so they were approved to do that for any animal that came in as an emergency. If it was above that tier, then they would have to call for supervisor approval. And so that's helped us as well with triaging a lot of calls.
This is another document that we made that came out to be really helpful, was kind of like a agreement, so to speak, of expectations of the foster parent and expectations of the staff that are answering the phone call. So, you know, we expect fosters to only call us if it's truly an emergency. And we expect staff to respond promptly, nicely, and give a good, you know, response. But that being said, I do always warn staff when they start. Some people just think tapeworms are emergencies. Like, there's nothing you can do to convince them that it's not an emergency. And there's situations where just because it's not an emergency, you know, if they're panicking about something, we owe it to them to respond kindly, answer their question, and tell them, come pick up medicine in the morning. So yeah, just kind of another, I don't know, somewhere where it can get really messy if there's no clear-cut expectations that are communicated to everybody.
And Google Voice is great too because of the chat or the text feature. So it's pretty easy to communicate to people quickly with videos, or to send me a picture or whatever without having to have a full-blown conversation at 3 a.m.
Yeah, and speaking of those 3 a.m. calls, you know, as we talk about creating foster-centric organizations, partnering with our community to support the services that we're trying to provide, you know, it's those 3 a.m. calls that really cultivate the relationship, right? I think people look at us as the experts, and they're calling us because they respect and value our opinions. And so, you know, it may seem like, wow, I had to wake up for this 3 a.m. call, but really what you're doing is bridging a relationship. And that foster will then know what to do next time. And through that, you build ambassador fosters as well, right? You see the people that are really standing above others, you recruit them to be a part of your processes, and hopefully that's how you create community. And that's one of the things that I always looked at, even when I was a little cranky at 3 a.m., was hopefully this person will take another 10 pets after this one 3 a.m. call. Jordana, anything in closing for us? We're so grateful for you sharing. We did want to take a couple of minutes before the end of the call to preview next week's call, but we'd love to hear from you, Jordana.
Yeah, you know, I think creating these foster-centric medical clinics is really important, especially as we look at the future of animal welfare. And we know that foster is going to play a huge role in that. It's where animals deserve to be, it's where they need to be, it's where they do best. People want to foster animals, we know that. And so we really need to be able to build these clinics. They're already strained. We already have a vet shortage. So we really need to, again, just be thoughtful about how we build these clinics and make sure that they're sustainable, and we can, you know, we can scale them to fit our shelter and fit our resources.
Jordana, we appreciate you so much spending the hour with us. If people do have any questions, would you mind putting your email in the chat? So speaking of next week, I see that we have Lucy on the call. As we are really moving to community partnerships and community supported programs, self-rehoming is a big part of that. Lucy is the working group lead for our self-rehoming working group. And that is going to be our topic item for next week's Wednesday summit. So Lucy, do you want to maybe touch for 2 minutes on what you're working on in that group and what they might hear about next week?
Sure. As sort of a sneak peek, I was able to get your pet, rehome.adoptapet.com and home to home, the leads on those tool sets to join the working group. So we got some really invaluable feedback. And we also were able to be like, hey, so this doesn't make sense. Can we, so we were able to have those conversations and like, understand from, the shelter perspective and, as fosters, as community members, kind of what works, what doesn't, what we would like to see, that kind of stuff. We got an at a glance tool at a glance thing that we have that's also part of the KFT, or Keeping Families Together toolkit, that's already been deployed. So next steps, we're looking into community feedback and doing a survey for organization input on how to, great, we got this cool shiny thing, how do we get the word out so that we can keep pets in homes instead of in the shelter. So pretty exciting stuff. Looking forward to it next week.
Thank you so much for your leadership in that group, Lucy. And so everyone, please look out for that email. We are going to be inviting additional guests and some of the experts that are running the technologies to support this, hopefully to be able to join us next week. Jane, we also wanted to send you a very warm welcome for your first meeting. We hope that you'll join us again next week. We hope everybody has an amazing week and a very awesome, peaceful weekend, and can't wait to see you next week. So have a good day, everyone.
Bye, all. Nice to see you.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.